Peace, family. It is I, the Emma Energy Master Allah, and you are watching the Leopard in the Mirror, Canticle of the Mutant Guardian lecture series, season 2. And we are still in that back matter, and we are going into the chapter called The Running Man. If you're just joining us for the first time, make sure that you hit that subscribe button. If you're watching on YouTube, I record these live on Facebook first, and then I schedule them. This new season officially started August 1st. If you're watching that, yeah. And we're going to get into it. So before, I talked a little bit about how this whole project got started in the first place. The research I was doing, we were talking about the tetrahedron. And now we're getting into this glyph, this figure we call the Running Man. First and foremost, before we get busy, make sure if you don't already have your copy, make sure you grab one of those. Physical copy available on Amazon. IRL, books in real life, yo. All right, let's get into it. All right, so the Running Man. All right, it's just easier for me to go ahead and read the section first, and then we'll go back through it, hop over here to the whiteboard, and we'll start explaining some of this. Okay. All right, so you got the Running Man glyph, and you see the Ani. Last time I talked about that, how we have the Latin/English letter A here. We got the Hebrew Aleph. Here we got the Arabic Alif, and they look like they say Ani, A-N-I, but it's actually 3 letter A's in the olden days. All right, the glyph that was created by placing the letters in this way and removing it from the tetrahedron wasn't perfect, but reminded me of a crude figure of a man running. Hence, this was called the Running Man glyph for quite some time until I could figure out what else to do with it. I'd first like to call your attention to the resemblance of these letters to the English letters A-N-I spelling Ani when placed next to each other. Ani, which also appears as Allah, means earth in Igbo. The cube is the symbol of earth in Platonism. It is associated with nature, and the pentacle in tarot, which I sometimes associate with space, mass, matter, and the formation of bodies. Naturally, Ani would be Ina in reverse. The word Ina means fire in Yoruba. The tetrahedron is the symbol of fire in Platonism and is associated with will and the wand/staff in tarot, which I associate with torque, pressure, and plasma in physics. The mirror relationship between Igbo and Yoruba seems echoed in the relationship between Hebrew and Arabic as expressions of the feminine and masculine aspects. If looking at the placement of A-N-I and I-N-A in the tetrahedron, the latter rotates clockwise from father to mother to child, and the former rotates counterclockwise from child to mother to father. This depicts a fiery descent from the heavens contrasted by an earthly birth that leads to ascension. Similarities between Igbo and Hebrew seem to be no accident. Hebrew comes from Ibri, which comes from Abara, meaning to pass, cross. Abara means spirit being in Igbo. In the cosmology of Igbo, Odinani or Odinala, the tale of the first people who crossed into physically embodied existence aligns with the name Lemuria, assigned to the mythological land of spirits. Lemuria is similar in form to Igbo Alamuwo, the land of spirits. Likewise, similarities between Yoruba and Arabic are no coincidence. Considering the origin of the word from Yaribo, the origin story of the Yoruba originating in the Middle East and migrating to West Africa aligns with the derogatory name Yoruba used by Hausa Fulani people to describe those of the Oyo Empire, a Yoruba subgroup, as deceitful, unreliable, treacherous. This matches the Arabic etymology itself, with Arab coming from to upbraid, disapprove, declare foul, also to express, state clearly, declare, or to scarify. Facial scarification is more associated with Yoruba culture than with Arab culture as the way as we think of it today. The Igbo Hebrew and Yoruba Arabic parity are reflected in both the ancient and modern mythologies of Lemuria and Atlantis. In the case of the latter, it is traditionally held that King Atlas is its founder and namesake. In Yoruba and Edo, the Orisha creator of the human body, Obatala, gets his name from Oba Atala, meaning king of the white cloth. The Greek name Atlas has shaky etymology and is proposed to be pre-Greek. In their mythology, Atlas is either a titan who fathered the 7 Pleiades sisters or the first king of Mauritania, not the modern-day country, but a region in modern-day Morocco and Algeria. The Reichat structure, or Eye of the Sahara, is a 3-ring structure in Mauritania that matches Plato's descriptions of Atlantis. In Theosophy, Lemurian descendants gave rise to the first agricultural Atlanteans. These Atlanteans are said to have been moved from northwest Africa to the Canary Islands and Cape Verde, where they established 12 families that echo the 12 tribes of Israel. Several details from the Igbo myth of Eri arriving to aid the people after the Great Flood closely aligns with the accounts credited to Thoth in the Emerald Tablets of Thoth the Atlantean. Kabbalah describes a council of 12 who govern, typically associated with the 12 lines of a cube and 12 months of the solar calendar, with a complementary 13th to account for the lunar calendar. This is comparable also to the 12 zodiac signs, with the hidden 13th, Ophiuchus, the orphan. All right, that's all. We ain't gonna go much further than that. Let's go ahead, break some of this stuff down. A lot of stuff being said there. Okay, so you see what we're talking about. So, as remember, this shape is a tetrahedron. It's a 2D representation of a 3D object that has 4 sides. It's the most basic platonic solid. Platonic, of course, coming from the name Plato, the philosopher and geometer in Greek culture. All right, and so, like I said before, I placed each one of these letters in a spiral arrangement, and it sort of kind of started looking like something. This ain't where it really started looking like something, but this was the start. But I don't think I talk about it in this book, so I might as well show it to you now. If I turn this around and show the reflection in the mirror, you can see that the letter A, I could have drawn it straighter, but the letter A there actually resembles the, so in the Great Pyramid diagram, or whatever, and I should turn it and show it to you, but basically like how you have like the shaft, you got an entrance that comes in. You can't really see it. Here, let me see if it'll let me focus on that. Yeah, there you go. Okay, yeah, so it's like, this is like the king's chamber right here, and then you got like a shaft that goes down, and then it branches off, and you got like the hidden chamber down here, the subterranean chamber rather, and then you got like a vent thing that goes up. Well, it's an escape chamber, whatever else. But yeah, so like it's an overlay. Matter of fact, let me go ahead and show you that so you know it ain't cap. I gotta bring it up. I wasn't prepared to show it. I was supposed to do this another day, but I gotta do them when I can. You know what I'm saying? My daughter got a little while before she goes to therapy. She's in there with my grands. Give me a chance to speak with you guys, record, get some episodes recorded and in the bank so they could premiere on time. Okay, so this one. Okay, so you kind of see how you got like this structure that's kind of like a letter A here. And that's like just kind of like the general makeup of these. Like they got those same A forms, but then this is the line that comes down to the right. This is where the man body is, so he doesn't have the head on it in our picture yet. But then we get there in a minute. But just keep all that in mind. So like a letter A, this is drawn like a letter A, and you got this line coming down here, and you got the one poking up here. So when we go back to this, now this is the inverted. Like of course you have to look at it in the mirror. Lift it in the mirror. Okay, so you see it there. Like I got it kind of turned, but you can still see like the correlation, like the post going up, and then the joint coming here, and then that little guy does. So I didn't know that at the time when I was making this thing. Like I had no idea. And then you see like this other section up here because of the left. Normally in the diagrams for the Great Pyramid, you don't really see anything right there. So there might actually be like some hidden chambers. It might be stuff that's been discovered, since then. But at the time, I had no idea of that, potential correlation. All right. So, anyways, so we talked about Ani and Allah. We talked about that last time. All right. So at the time, I included space in my association with Earth, but I would adjust that. So formation of body, so form. So it is. So I agree, association with form, but space is more associated with Akash. So that you could think of that as ether and breath, atmosphere, stuff like that. So that's a little more what that would be or whatever. So it's the counterpart to Earth. But with Earth, you also have an element of essence. So in Hindu thought, you have elemental Earth is called Prithvi. And with Prithvi, it's the stage at which something is solid enough to be able to, and stable enough to be able to emit smell. So smell is an actual physical sensation, because small little itty bitty pieces of the thing have to travel. The particles have to travel from the source to, your senses, to your nose, in order for you to smell it. So it's an actual physical and chemical reaction that happens there. And we call that essence. So part of you is leaving your solid structure without, it having to be damaged. And it's giving somebody else the experience of you in that way. So it differs from, like the eyes and sight, they have to require like light bouncing off of things. It is different from hearing, where, a mechanical wave has to be initiated by some external object or whatever. But in this particular case, it is an actual physical transfer of the essence that comes off of the actual person or place or object that you're smelling. All right. Okay, so we talk about this inversion here. So a word meaning earth in Igbo language, in reverse, means fire in Yoruba language. So these are neighbors. The Igbo and Yoruba come from a common ancestor from the Niger-Congo family, and from the greater like Kwa and Benue Congo family, to which the Bantu also belong. So there's a proto language that preceded the divergence of these, and a lot of what I'm talking about is related to all of that. All right. And of course, and then here I say I associate fire with a couple of things here. So it is traditionally held that the wheel and like the wand staff type image. So the scepter that they talk about rises out of Israel in Numbers, I believe it's 24:17, if I remember correctly, wherever they have the messianic prophecy. And so here I say I associate that with like torque, pressure, and plasma. Do I still feel the same way about pressure? Yeah, maybe. Yeah, because it falls into like thermodynamics. So that's what I would expand that to. Plasma still, because fire is itself a plasma. Yeah. It says the mirror relationship. Okay, so it's like so this whole father mother child thing. So the old Trinity, Egypt and in different cases is always the father, mother, and child. And I impose that onto these particular, letters. That's not something that's necessarily inherent when it comes to those particular letters, but it was useful for keeping things organized and being able to just kind of play around and test the model. So don't take that as law or anything. That's just the way I was choosing to look at it as I was looking at the way that it rotates. All right. Now, parts of this etymology that I applied and the suggestion of the similarity between these words, once again, not necessarily set in law, but this is a real conversation. And the comparisons between Igbo and Hebrew, it's not skin deep. There's a lot of research going into this. The most likely scenario is that there were traditions that already existed for like thousands of years, and in the case of certain oral traditions, it could be like hundreds of thousands of years, where just certain aspects of society were already kind of in place. I don't know about hundreds of thousands of years ago. I can't, speak on that. But then, as far as at least 20 to 25,000 years ago, that I can support. I have, translations and different things in it that agree with like the early old kingdom Egyptian records from that time period. So yeah, that okay. And so, Lemuria, if you are familiar with like the esoteric space and even like ufology and all that stuff that's popular on YouTube and whatnot, you should be thoroughly familiar with Lemuria. If not, at least you are familiar with Atlantis, which is Atlantis is often thought of as the masculine counterpart to Lemuria, which represented the divine feminine, and basically like the way society and civilization worked before it became a patriarchy and male dominated and stuff. And so Lemuria means land of spirits, and so does Alamumor. So the connection there, Lemuria, Alamur. Okay, and that is considered the womb of Allah, the womb of the earth. The dead return to her womb when they pass. Okay, so I give this etymology and I lean so as I talked about like the context of how the Hausa and Fulani refer to the Oyo and see that, and that was an assertion by Wabasi, but I was the one in my research that looked and saw that it was also associated with to express, state clearly, and declare. So that's what Arab actually means. And so to Arabize used to be where they would come in and not a whole like even this is before Islam, but even with Islam, like when it came along, the whole purpose was it was supposed to clarify misinterpretations of the scripture because the people that we associate with those scriptures who identifies that today, it was it was a tradition that was handed down to them, and so sometimes when you have scholarship and stuff like that or whatever, they may veer a particular direction when it comes to translation, but then if you get this stuff in its raw form and you start to kind of uncover some of the hidden layers and the meticulous structuring that goes with it, you can kind of tell, what's really what. But this whole clarification process, it does have to do, if you're familiar with the concept of the Krishna Yajurveda and the Shukla Yajurveda in Vedic teachings or whatever, it was this concept of, these sages receiving the lessons in like a mixed up form to where like the rituals and hymns and stuff were all mixed together. And so it had to be clarified. They had to be separated so that you could know which one was which. And so that's where a lot of the confounding of the language of Babel comes into play, where people don't know which. There's things that are being ritualized that are just supposed to be songs, and there's stuff that's being made in the songs that were actually supposed to be, ritual action or whatever. So you see what kind of mess that could snowball into if you look at the world today. Okay, talk a little bit about cultural aspects there. Now the whole Atlantis thing. Okay, so I talk a little bit about King Atlas, and then I assert that Oba Atala, so King Atala or whatever. That's a strong match, and it's like I run into these like all the time, like especially within that particular pocket. As you see with Yoruba and Igbo and Edo, those particular tribes from that same cluster I was talking about, they're particularly of interest because they're kind of an outlier when it comes to the D haplogroup, the D male haplogroup family, whereas most of Africa, that is of the E haplogroup, so it's like the DE haplogroup family, so that includes D and E, and so E is typically associated with being dominant throughout Africa. D is usually associated more so with being present in like Tibet, Japan, throughout Southeast Asia, places like this. But we had a pocket of D that exists in Nigeria among Yoruba, Igbo, and Edo. And because those tribes have been separate tribes for quite some time, that means that would have had to happen long before they ever separated. On the flip side of that, the E haplogroup, in addition to being very present among the Bantu and the Bantu migrations, it was also present in the Levant, where Israel all the good stuff is. It was present in Anatolia, which is now Turkey. It was and they love talking about Göbekli Tepe up there, whatever. But that was us too, Anatolia, and then those folks traveled the Mediterranean and the Aegean Sea and settled in those places like Greece and Patmos and stuff. And so those Greeks were E haplogroup. So the full picture is a lot different in many ways from what the mainstream narrative wants to present it as. All right, so if you try to look up the etymology for Atlas, for Atlantis and Atlas, really, like it's kind of shaky, and you find that to be a tendency because the Proto-Indo-European language that they propose that props up a bunch of this stuff is still just that, a proposed language, not necessarily an actual language. And the more I dove into that, the more I saw similarities, like a transition, where you can like kind of track like where prefixes were dropped and then other stuff added later, different common linguistic shifts that were historically accurate. I tracked a lot of that to show like there a lot of the claims that Catherine Cholono speaks of in her books, Summer in Eden, and all of that type of stuff. She the late Dr. Catherine, she was right on point with saying that Igbo, at least the proto tongue, because a lot of these same words appear in, like, let's say, like Congo, they're a Bantu tribe in Central Africa. So it's like certain stuff that pops up across the board, and it's very much tied like those who first settled India were direct migrants from their region and stuff. So you still end up with like similar words that existed before the seminal texts of the Vedas. Okay, in the mythology, Atlas is either a Titan who fathered the 7 Pleiades sisters. The Pleiades sisters are the 7 stars. You can only see 6 of them. The ancients knew there were 7. All right, and then you've got myths about that particular star cluster all over the planet. People that ain't had contact, in a major way for like over 50,000 years. And I'm talking namely about the the Australian Aborigines. They got a lot of similar stories to what they had in Greece and stuff. And so everybody kind of proposes that it would have had to have existed as a story in the Levant, because that's Eurasian region right in the middle of there is like the main place where everybody encountered one another, and so about Mauritania, they say that is one of the sources of the name Moors. Y'all can get in a conversation about that. The Rycat structure. So if you haven't seen this joint, I feel like I have a duty to show you. Make sure I'm spelling it right. There you go, yeah. So if you look at this thing, they call it the Eye of the Sahara. It's in the Sahara Desert and it looks like an eye, but it also looks like a ring structure in the earth. All right, and then this, I believe this is a picture of Atlantis, or at least how they depict it based on Plato's descriptions or whatever. According to the people who, who are channelers and people who assert that they got the good information as it relates to that, they say that that was just one of a few colonies. All right, so then I get into the correlations of 12, like just to demonstrate like the various ways that this story of the 12 and the 13th month. So this is all having to deal with time and calendars. It's always about reconciling the solar calendar with the lunar calendar. All right, let's keep that in mind. It's always reconciliation between the 12 sun signs and the 13 moon signs. Getting those two to align. Okay. And that's really it, y'all. Talk about 13th zodiac sign, Ophiuchus. And I'll go ahead and tell you now, that has something to do with Krishna. And perhaps later I can show you how even that figure ties into both Yahweh and Allah. If you get some of the older texts before, racism, for racist folks, try to make sure you look nothing like how he actually showed up. But that's neither here nor there. So if you haven't already, make sure that you like, you subscribe, and I will see you in episode 3. Peace.